The air hung heavy in the hotel room, thick with unspoken tension. Damien adjusted his tie, his reflection staring back from the mirror, a stranger in a world he no longer recognized. His wife, Isabella, sat at the vanity, applying another layer of lipstick. Her lips were a scarlet slash against her perfectly powdered face. "Are you almost ready?" Damien asked, his voice tight. Isabella dabbed at her lips with a tissue. "Impatient, are we?" Her tone was sharp, laced with an edge he knew all too well. It was the same edge that had crept into their marriage, slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. He longed for the days when their laughter had filled the silences, when a shared glance had spoken volumes. Now a chasm stretched between them, a chasm paved with misunderstandings and unfulfilled expectations. The air crackled with tension as the photographer positioned Isabella under the harsh studio lights. Damien watched from a distance, a knot of unease twisting in his gut. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. And then it did. A clumsy movement, a gasp of horror, and a splash of crimson stained the pristine white of Isabella's designer dress. The spilled wine seemed to hang in the air, a catalyst for the storm that was brewing. Isabella's face contorted with fury. "Are you blind?" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the studio. "Do you know how much this dress cost?" The young photographer stammered an apology, his face ashen. But Isabella was beyond reason. Her tirade continued, a torrent of insults and accusations. Damien watched, his heart sinking as the photographer was dismissed, his dream shattered like a dropped lens. The opulent restaurant hummed with the murmur of conversation and the clinking of expensive glasses. But the luxurious surroundings did little to ease the tension that crackled between Damien and Isabella. "Honestly, Damien, you'd think finding a competent photographer in this city would be easy," Isabella huffed, her voice laced with disdain. "But no, you had to hire that amateur." Damien stared down at his plate, his appetite gone. He knew Isabella was right. The photographer had been inexperienced, but her reaction had been out of proportion. It was as if the spilled wine had been the final straw, unleashing a torrent of pent-up frustrations. He longed to tell her how her words cut him, how her constant need for material possessions suffocated him, but the words stuck in his throat, trapped by the fear that had become a constant companion. The silence in the car was deafening as Damien pulled into the driveway of their home. The tension between them was palpable, a heavy cloud that seemed to fill the small space of the car. It wasn't the comfortable silence of shared thoughts and unspoken understanding. Instead, it was a silence that screamed of unresolved issues and unspoken words. It was the silence of a chasm that had grown too wide to bridge, a silence that had become their new normal, a constant reminder of the distance that had grown between them. Inside, Isabella went straight to their bedroom, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Each step echoed the weight of their strained relationship. Damien stood for a moment in the empty hallway, the weight of their unspoken words pressing down on him. He felt the loneliness of the space around him, a stark contrast to the life they once shared. He found her in their bedroom, surrounded by shopping bags. The sight of the bags was a familiar one, a symbol of their ongoing conflict. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and leather. Damien's heart sank as he realized that the material things she surrounded herself with were just a temporary escape from their problems. Another day, another extravagant purchase. It was a cycle that seemed to have no end, a band-aid on a wound that needed much more to heal. "We need to talk about our finances," he began, his voice weary. He knew this conversation would not be easy, but it was necessary. Isabella's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Not this again, Damien." Her voice was sharp, defensive. "It's always something with you, isn't it?" she spat, her voice laced with contempt. Her words cut through the air like a knife, always complaining about money, never wanting to enjoy the finer things in life. Her accusations were familiar, yet they stung just the same. Damien felt a surge of anger, hot and unfamiliar. It was a feeling he had tried to suppress, but it was becoming harder to contain. "Finer things?" he repeated, his voice rising. The frustration in his voice was evident. "Is that all you care about?" His question hung in the air, a challenge that demanded an answer. The argument that followed was one they had had countless times before. It was a script they both knew too well, each line a painful reminder of their differences. It was a dance they knew by heart. a vicious cycle of accusations and recriminations. Each argument left them more exhausted, more distant, and yet they seemed unable to break free from it. The aroma of coffee filled Damien's tiny studio, a welcome contrast to the sterile scent of the darkroom. He took a sip, the bitter liquid a welcome jolt to his exhausted senses. The nights had been long. Sleep had been a fleeting visitor lately, chased away by worries that clung to him like shadows. Each day felt like a battle. He glanced around the cluttered space, his gaze lingering on his camera bag. It was old, held together by duct tape and hope, a symbol of his perseverance, but it represented his escape, his sanctuary. Photography was more than just a hobby. It was his lifeline, his way of capturing the world and making sense of it. A wave of exhaustion washed over him. He missed the days when his passion had burned bright, fueled by dreams and aspirations. Those were the days when every click of the shutter felt like magic, when he believed in endless possibilities. He missed the man he used to be, the man before the weight of responsibility and disappointment had crushed his spirit. But as he developed his latest roll of film, a flicker of hope ignited within him. He had found a new location for his studio, a small space bathed in natural light. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a chance to rebuild, to reclaim his dreams. The new studio represented a fresh beginning, a place where he could once again find joy in his craft. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to overcome the obstacles that had once seemed insurmountable. This was his moment, his chance to rise from the ashes and create something beautiful once more. The silence between them had become a chasm, a vast and desolate landscape. They moved through their lives like strangers sharing a house, their interactions reduced to curt greetings and strained silences. Damien threw himself into his photography, finding solace in the world of light and shadow. He hired a new photographer, a talented young woman named Ella, to assist him. She was everything Isabella wasn't: passionate, dedicated, and full of life. He tried to ignore the whispers at the back of his mind, the ones that spoke of shared laughter and stolen glances. He tried to convince himself that it was just a professional connection, a shared passion for their craft, but the truth was a bitter pill to swallow. The confrontation, when it finally came, was like a thunderstorm. Sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. It had been brewing for weeks, the tension between them thickening like the humid air before a storm. Each passing day added another layer of pressure, another unspoken word, another glance filled with suspicion. Damien had come home late, exhausted but exhilarated after a successful photo shoot with Ella. The shoot had gone better than he had hoped, and for a brief moment he had forgotten the storm waiting for him at home. He had hoped to share his joy with Isabella, to see her smile and feel her embrace. He found Isabella in the living room, her face pale, her eyes blazing with an emotion he couldn't quite place. It was a mix of anger, hurt, and something else. Something that made his heart race with a sudden, inexplicable fear. "Who is she, Damien?" Her voice was low, dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes an eruption, the calm before the storm. Damien felt a coldness spread through him. It was as if the warmth of the evening had been sucked out, leaving him in a chilling void. He knew this moment was inevitable, yet he had hoped it would never come. "What are you talking about? Don't play games with me," Isabella hissed, throwing a magazine onto the coffee table. The sound of it hitting the wood was like a gunshot in the silence of the room. It fell open to a picture of Damien and Ella, their smiles mirroring each other's. The image was innocent enough, but in the context of their strained relationship, it was a spark in a room full of gasoline. The words spilled out of him then, a torrent of frustration and resentment. He had been holding them back for so long, and now they poured out uncontrollably, like a dam breaking under the pressure. He told her everything about the crushing weight of her expectations, the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a gilded cage. He spoke of dreams deferred and passions stifled, of a love that had turned into a prison. The argument that followed was their most explosive yet, a culmination of years of unspoken resentments and unfulfilled desires. It was as if every slight, every hurt, every disappointment had been waiting for this moment to be unleashed. It ended with Isabella's hand connecting with his cheek, the sharp sting, a physical manifestation of the pain that had been festering between them for far too long. The slap was not just an act of anger, but a desperate cry for understanding, for resolution, for an end to the storm that had consumed their lives. The days that followed were a blur. Damien moved through them in a daze, the echoes of Isabella's tearful apology ringing in his ears. She had begged for forgiveness, pleaded for a second chance, but some wounds, Damien realized, cut too deep to heal. The trust was broken, the foundation of their relationship shattered beyond repair. He threw himself into his work, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of his craft. His talent, once stifled by the weight of his unhappy marriage, blossomed. His photographs, once filled with a quiet melancholy, now pulsed with life and energy. He signed contracts with prestigious magazines, his work featured in galleries across the city. His success was a vindication, a testament to his talent and resilience. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a warm, golden glow. Damien stood on the balcony of his new apartment, a sense of peace washing over him. He was alone. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel lonely. He had his photography, his passion, and a newfound sense of purpose. The shrill ring of his phone broke the silence. It was Ella, her voice bright and cheerful as she updated him on their latest project. As he listened to her, he felt a spark of something new ignite within him, a flicker of hope, a promise of a brighter future. He was starting over, a blank canvas stretched before him, and this time he would paint his own masterpiece.